Welcome to Crops, Cattle, and Charley. I'm Charley Martinez, and I'm joined today by Andrew Griffith and the University of Tennessee crop economist, Dr. Aaron Smith, who's with the Department of Agriculture and Resource Economics. Today, Dr. Smith is going to be discussing harvest delivery considerations. So, Dr. Smith, if a producer can't store their crop, what options do they have at harvest?
Well, it can be really challenging if you don't have storage, and by access to storage, I mean both on-farm, off-farm, even considering things like bags, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But one of the things that's very challenging, if you have to deliver that crop right off the combine, it really restricts what you can do in terms of viable marketing strategies, particularly if you haven't priced anything. If you price something, then obviously you're going to deliver to a certain location where you've got it priced, or if the delivery location is defined, then that kind of does help as well. But if you don't have anything priced and you have to sell right off the combine, a couple of things that you can consider is first, you need to evaluate what are the viable delivery points that are available to your individual farm. So looking at, is there an ethanol facility, poultry companies, distilleries, elevators or barge points, feed suppliers, livestock producers. I know it's a lot to kind of step through, but finding a few extra cents per bushel can be very beneficial. One thing that you also do have to end up doing is evaluating the time periods for the pricing opportunities that are there, and then making sure that you adjust those prices for any of the transaction or transportation costs that are associated with getting the grain to that facility. So just because one facility, for example, is offering $3.40 for corn and another one is offering $3.50 for corn, if your transportation costs are more than 10 cents for the one that's $3.50 and the other one compared to the other one, then it might make more sense to take the lower price, even though the transportation costs are higher for the other one. So again, it's the net between what the price is and what the transportation and transaction costs. The other one that a lot of people don't necessarily factor in sometimes is when you're talking about transportation costs. Yes, the mileage and the estimated cost to end up transporting is important, but looking at wait times, I know we have some facilities where the wait times are substantially higher than the other. And you have to remember that if you've got a truck, either yourself or an employee sitting in the truck waiting to unload, that is adding to that cost per bushel because you're expending that time to end up getting the truck unloaded. That is going to increase your transaction or your transportation costs. So again, you do have to be very cautious on how you evaluate the true costs of transportation and transactions in addition to what the net price is. The other thing too that is very important is you do have to continuously evaluate what the price offerings are, because they can swing very dramatically in a very short amount of time. So making sure that you're looking at, has individual locations offerings changed on a day-to-day basis, because that can really end up assisting you in determining on what's going to be the most beneficial financial outcome. The last kind of one, and again, you have to be very careful with this, is getting that crop out of the field is incredibly important, because you don't want to leave it out there to get damaged. But in some circumstances, delaying harvest might be an effective option. But again, you really have to weigh that potential for production losses against the potential for increased prices. So again, usually that's not going to be the best alternative. I think there's better alternatives in terms of making sure that crop gets out of the field rather than leaving it and hoping it for a higher price. So, I mean, I would be very cautious with that, but it is something that could be considered under certain circumstances.
So, Dr. Smith, are storage bags a viable option for producers with insufficient bin storage?
Well, that's a real tricky one because it really depends on individual circumstances. So maybe, first you have to determine the availability of the equipment in order to be able to do that, including the bagger, the unloader, bags, the added labor that it requires to get the crop into storage. The other thing too is site preparation. You really have to make sure that you got a well-drained site away from bush or other sources of infestation, contamination, or animal damage. So just making sure that it's stored in a clean environment. The other one is the grain's got to be dry when it goes into those bags and needs to be monitored both on the interior of the bag and then doing the due diligence of walking around the bags to make sure there's no tears, no external damage. One thing that is positive for corn in Tennessee is if you can store it, we typically get a very predictable increase in prices as we move through the marketing year. It's not to say that it will always occur, but if you can gain that 20 to 40 cents to get a higher price just by getting corn stored past the harvest time interval, it might make storage or bag storage be a viable option for your operation. So again, you're going to have to look at what is the cost of establishing that storage, getting those bags filled, and then what's the potential payoff in terms of having a price appreciation in your individual area.
Awesome. Well, good stuff, Dr. Smith. And thank you to the viewers for joining us on this episode of Cropscat on Charley. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope you'll join us on the next one. Thank you.